70 years on the throne, access to the world's most spectacular tiara collection, and yet there are diadems in the royal vaults that never once graced Elizabeth II's head. Some were gifted to her in youth, others inherited from royal ancestors, and still others found their way into her hands under mysterious circumstances. But instead of wearing these cascades of diamonds, the Queen did something else entirely. She gave them away, loaned them out, stored them for decades, waiting for just the right moment. And when these forgotten tiaras finally emerged into the spotlight, they became the stars of royal weddings and state banquets, just not on the head they belonged to. What drove these decisions? And what does it tell us about a queen's strategy of hoarding rather than wearing? Today, we'll uncover what Elizabeth II generously loaned out, what remained in the shadows, and what has almost vanished from history entirely. Let's start with the most telling examples. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. So what exactly made Elizabeth II's approach to her tiara collection so unusual? Let me show you through 3 perfect examples that reveal her fascinating pattern of behavior. She'd own these glittering masterpieces, yet never wear them herself, instead watching them sparkle on the heads of others at the most important moments. Let's start with what might be the most telling case of all, the Cartier Halo Tiara. The story begins back in 1936, when the Duke of York, later King George VI, purchased this delicate diamond creation from Cartier for his wife, Elizabeth. Made in the summer of 1936, this band was meant to enhance the Duchess of York's relatively modest jewelry collection. Here's where the story gets interesting, and perhaps a touch ironic. The Duchess of York did wear her new tiara a few times in the late 1930s, but then something rather significant happened. Her husband unexpectedly became King George VI, and she found herself Queen Elizabeth. Suddenly, this charming little tiara seemed rather too modest for a queen consort. So in 1944, as her daughter Princess Elizabeth celebrated her 18th birthday during the austere war years, the Queen Mother gave her own halo tiara to mark her daughter's transition into adulthood. And yet, remarkably, the future Queen Elizabeth II was never once photographed wearing her birthday present. Not once. Perhaps, having come of age during the austerity of the war, opportunities were few. And by the time grand events returned, she was already queen, with access to the most magnificent state jewels. It seems this lovely, delicate piece was simply destined to be a tiara for young princesses, a role it has fulfilled beautifully. Instead, it became something of a go-to loan for younger royals. We saw it on her sister, Princess Margaret, who chose it for the grandest of occasions, the 1953 coronation of Queen Elizabeth herself. Years later, it was Princess Anne's turn, making this tiara her signature piece for her first tiara appearances in the late 1960s and early 1970s. But perhaps most surprisingly of all, after decades in the vaults, this little tiara emerged for one of the most watched royal weddings in recent memory, when Catherine Middleton chose it for her walk down the aisle at Westminster Abbey in 2011. Then, there's the intriguing case of Princess Andrew's meander tiara, a piece that tells the story of the royal family's Greek heritage. This diamond beauty, with its distinctive Greek key design punctuated by a central laurel wreath, belonged to Prince Philip's mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg. When Alice gave it to her new daughter-in-law, Princess Elizabeth, as a wedding gift in 1947, it seemed like the perfect piece for a future queen. But once again, we see that same pattern. Elizabeth II, despite owning this meaningful family heirloom, was never photographed wearing it publicly. Instead, by 1972, she had officially passed it on to her daughter, Princess Anne, who made excellent use of it at state functions and official portraits. The tiara's most memorable recent appearance? Princess Anne's daughter Zara wore it for her wedding to Mike Tyndall in 2011. Great-grandmother Alice's tiara finally getting its moment in the spotlight again, just not on the head it was originally intended for. I find it rather touching how this piece connected 3 generations of royal women, each finding their own relationship with it, except, curiously, the one who actually inherited it as a wedding gift. But perhaps the most dramatic example of this pattern is Queen Mary's diamond bandeau. Here's a tiara with quite the backstory, created by Gerard in 1932, specifically to showcase a small diamond brooch that had been given to Queen Mary as a wedding present way back in 1893 by the people of Lincolnshire. That little brooch had sat in her jewelry box for nearly 40 years before she decided to build an entire tiara around it. Queen Mary wore her new bandeau occasionally, mostly for less formal events like film premieres. When she died in 1953, she left it to her granddaughter, Elizabeth II. And then, nothing. Complete silence for 65 years. The bandeau sat in the royal vaults, forgotten by many royal watchers, until that extraordinary moment in May 2018 when Meghan Markle emerged from her car at St. George's Chapel, wearing this long-lost treasure. Can you imagine a tiara sleeping in darkness for over half a century, only to awaken for one of the most scrutinized royal weddings of the modern era? But here's what strikes me most. In all those years, through decades of state banquets and gala performances, Queen Elizabeth II never once chose to wear this elegant piece herself. 3 different tiaras, 3 different stories, but one consistent thread: Elizabeth II's remarkable willingness to let others shine in jewels that were rightfully hers. And there's something rather telling about all 3 pieces, isn't there? Each one seems perfectly scaled for a princess or a young royal, but perhaps just a touch too modest for the woman who would wear the imperial state crown. When the Queen Mother passed away in March 2002, she left behind an extraordinary collection of royal jewels, 8 decades of careful collecting by one of Britain's most stylish queens. But here's that same fascinating pattern emerging again. Queen Elizabeth II inherited these magnificent tiaras, yet chose to keep most tucked away, letting them resurface in unexpected ways rather than wearing them herself. It's quite remarkable when you think about it. A monarch with access to some of the world's most beautiful tiaras, preferring to let others wear them while sticking to her trusted favorites. But perhaps that restraint made these pieces even more special when they finally reappeared. The Strathmore Rose Tiara has one of the most touching backstories in the royal collection. In 1923, when Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon prepared to marry the Duke of York, her father, the Earl of Strathmore, wanted something truly special for his youngest daughter. This wasn't just any wedding gift. It was a father's love translated into diamonds and crafted into wild roses. The tiara was quite ingenious. Those 5 diamond roses could be removed and worn as individual brooches, or even swapped for sapphires, giving the young Duchess 2 completely different looks. It came with 2 separate frames, one for the fashionable 1920s bandeau style worn low across the forehead, another for traditional placement atop the head. The Duchess of York embraced her father's gift wholeheartedly, wearing it for glamorous portrait sessions that captured the spirit of the Roaring Twenties. But when her husband unexpectedly became King George VI in 1937, this charming family heirloom seemed perhaps too modest for a queen consort, and the Strathmore Rose quietly retreated from public view. For decades, rumors persisted that it had fallen into disrepair. But when the tiara appeared in exhibitions and Hugh Roberts's authoritative book, it was revealed to be in perfect condition. It had simply been waiting. Queen Elizabeth II inherited the tiara after her mother's death, but never wore it publicly. Then, in November 2023, something wonderful happened. The Princess of Wales chose this very tiara for the South Korean state banquet at Buckingham Palace. 100 years after the Earl of Strathmore gave it to his daughter with such love, the wife of his great-great-grandson brought it back into the spotlight. The lotus flower tiara tells a different tale, one of transformation and royal resourcefulness. This piece began life as an elaborate necklace with meander and festoon designs, set with diamonds and pearls. It was a 1923 wedding gift from the Duke of York to his bride, purchased from Gerard. But Elizabeth had been taking notes from her mother-in-law, Queen Mary, famous for reimagining jewelry. Just 6 months after her wedding, the young Duchess returned to Garrard with a bold request. Could they please dismantle this beautiful necklace and turn it into a tiara instead? The resulting piece, with lotus flower elements topped by diamond arches and pearls, became a favorite for the Duchess's portrait sessions. In 1959, the Queen Mother passed it to Princess Margaret as a pre-wedding gift. Margaret wore it regularly and even loaned it to her daughter-in-law, Serena Stanhope, for her 1993 wedding. After Margaret's death in 2002, many assumed the tiara stayed with the Linley family. So imagine everyone's surprise when the Duchess of Cambridge appeared wearing it at the 2013 diplomatic reception. Margaret had returned this treasure to the royal vaults, and once again Queen Elizabeth II inherited a beautiful tiara she would never wear herself. Perhaps the most ingenious story involves jewelry that could literally change its identity. Between 1923 and 1925, the Duke of York gave his wife 5 exquisite Art Deco bracelets from Cartier, one featuring sapphires, another emeralds, a third rubies, and 2 set with diamonds. In 1925, she acquired a special bandeau frame that allowed 3 bracelets to be assembled into a tiara. This Cartier bracelet bandeau became quite fashionable in the late 1920s and early 1930s, worn to ballet performances and galas. But as the 1930s progressed and she became queen, the bracelet-tiara combination disappeared from public view. By the 1970s, the Queen Mother had passed these bracelets to Queen Elizabeth II, who wore them regularly, but always as bracelets, never assembling them back into tiara form. Today, Queen Camilla has begun wearing these treasures, starting with the emerald bracelet in 2024. But that original bandeau frame, it's presumably still waiting in the royal vaults for someone to rediscover the magic of transformation that once made a duchess sparkle in 3 different ways with the same jewelry. Will we ever see this remarkable bracelet-tiara combination again? That remains one of the most intriguing mysteries in the royal collection. Now we come to the true titans of the royal collection. These are not the delicate personal heirlooms of a young princess or the sentimental treasures of a beloved mother. These are grand, formidable tiaras, statement pieces with immense presence and history, each one powerful enough for a reigning monarch. Yet she wore none of them. Instead, she became their master curator, assigning each a unique destiny, from public glory to reverent silence, turning these jewels into instruments of the monarchy's future. Let's start with one of the most mysterious pieces in the collection, the Teck crescent tiara. This extraordinary creation traces its lineage back to the very foundations of the modern royal collection. Princess Mary Adelaide, Duchess of Teck, Queen Mary's formidable mother, crafted this tiara from jewels she'd inherited from her aunt, Princess Mary, Duchess of Gloucester, a daughter of King George III himself. The design is quite dramatic, 20 diamond crescents embracing 3 wild diamond roses, with a slim band of diamonds at the base. Those crescents can actually face either direction, forward or backward, giving the tiara 2 completely different personalities depending on how it's worn. It's rather like having a secret identity hidden in plain sight. But here's what's so intriguing about this piece. It seems to have been cursed with invisibility. Queen Mary, who acquired it in the 1930s, was never photographed wearing it. When she passed it to the Queen Mother in 1936, Elizabeth made just one known public appearance in it, at a banquet in Canada in 1939. Then silence. For over 60 years, this tiara simply vanished from public view. After the Queen Mother's death in 2002, it became one of 3 tiaras that Queen Elizabeth II placed on long-term loan with the Duchess of Cornwall. But even Camilla, who has worn the other 2 loan pieces, has never appeared publicly in the Teck crescent. It's sitting there, waiting. But for what exactly? Now let me tell you about what King George V himself called May's best tiara, the Delhi Durbar tiara. Created in 1911 for that spectacular ceremony in India, This piece was Queen Mary's masterwork of royal theatre. She had her existing Boucheron loop tiara dismantled and the diamonds completely reimagined into something befitting an empress. In 1946, Queen Mary made what would prove to be a decisive move. She placed the Delhi Durbar tiara on permanent loan to her daughter-in-law for the royal family's tour of South Africa the following year. The Queen Mother wore it for that grand opening of Parliament in Cape Town, then never again. For the remaining 55 years of her life, this best tiara remained in her collection but never appeared on her head. When Queen Elizabeth II inherited it in 2002, she continued this pattern of profound respect, coupled with personal distance. The tiara went to the Duchess of Cornwall as another long-term loan, and Camilla gave it exactly one public outing, that Norwegian state banquet in October 2005. Since then, back to the vaults. What is it about this magnificent piece that seems to inspire such reverence that it's almost too precious to wear? Perhaps no story better illustrates Queen Elizabeth II's approach to inherited jewelry than what happened with the Greville collection. When the remarkable Dame Margaret Greville died in 1942, she left her extraordinary jewelry collection to the Queen Mother with, as she put it, her loving thoughts. The Queen Mother's letter to Queen Mary captures her genuine emotion. "I must tell you that Mrs. Greville has left me her jewels. Dear old thing, and I feel very touched. I do admire beautiful stones with all my heart." Among those treasures was the honeycomb tiara that Boucheron had created for Mrs. Greville. This tiara had undergone several transformations over its lifetime. Mrs. Greville herself had already had it redesigned by Boucheron in 1921, and later the Queen Mother made her own small adjustments in 1953. For the next 5 decades, this became the Queen Mother's signature tiara. She wore it to state banquets, gala performances, even family celebrations at Balmoral. It was her reliable companion through the decades of widowhood, appearing at Japanese state visits, RAF anniversaries, and countless evening events right up until her final tiara appearance in 1998. But when Queen Elizabeth II inherited this beloved piece in 2002, she made an intriguing choice. Despite its obvious beauty and the emotional weight of its history, she never wore it publicly. Not once. Instead, in 2005, it became the third piece in her long-term loan to the Duchess of Cornwall. And what a transformation that's been! For Camilla, the Greville tiara has become what it was for the Queen Mother, a signature piece, her tiara uniform for state occasions. She's worn it to state banquets across 4 continents, making it as much a part of her public identity as her pearl necklaces and elegant updos. But perhaps the most dramatic example of Queen Elizabeth II's curatorial approach involves the Greville Emerald kokosnik tiara. This stunning piece, also created by Boucheron for Mrs. Greville in 1919, features a massive 93.70 carat central emerald surrounded by diamonds in the fashionable Russian kokosnik style. For 76 years after Mrs. Greville's death, this tiara was essentially a myth. Unlike its diamond sister, it had disappeared so completely that most royal jewelry enthusiasts had forgotten it existed. When Queen Elizabeth II inherited it in 2002, the silence continued. Then came October 2018 and Princess Eugenie's wedding. As the bride stepped from her Rolls-Royce at St. George's Chapel, there it was, this forgotten masterpiece, blazing with emerald fire after decades in darkness. It was a moment that perfectly captured Queen Elizabeth II's approach, patient preservation followed by perfect timing. Do you see the pattern here? These aren't stories of neglect, but of careful stewardship. Queen Elizabeth II understood that sometimes the greatest gift you can give a magnificent object is the patience to wait for its perfect moment, its ideal wearer, its right time to shine again. One of the most puzzling inheritance mysteries in the royal collection involves the sapphire sunray bandeau. This flexible diamond tiara with a distinctive sunray pattern featured a central sapphire and diamond cluster that could be worn as a separate brooch. According to jewelry historian Leslie Field, the tiara may have originally belonged to Dowager Empress Marie Fyodorovna of Russia, one of several pieces Queen Mary purchased from the Russian imperial estate. However, the documentation around this provenance remains uncertain. The inheritance trail itself is equally murky. Sources differ on whether Queen Mary left the tiara directly to her granddaughter Queen Elizabeth II, who then loaned it to Princess Margaret, or whether Mary bequeathed it to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who loaned it to Margaret for a number of years. What's certain is that Princess Margaret became the tiara's most visible wearer during the 1950s and early 1960s. She wore it during her Caribbean tour in 1958, including that memorable dinner in Trinidad, where her powder blue gown was embroidered with diamonds and sapphires. Margaret also donned it for state visits and the wedding of Princess Astrid of Norway in 1961. After Margaret's active use ended in the early 1960s, the tiara vanished from public view. Most experts believe the sapphire sunray bandeau now sits quietly in the royal vaults, waiting for its next moment in the spotlight. Then there's Princess Margaret's Persian turquoise parure, a set that includes one of the largest tiaras in her former collection, yet its current whereabouts remain a matter of educated guesswork. Queen Mary purchased this stunning parure from Gerard, featuring diamonds and Persian turquoises in a design sometimes called the Triumph of Love tiara. In 1923, King George V gave the complete set to his new daughter-in-law, Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, as a wedding present. The young Duchess of York wore the turquoise jewels frequently during the 1920s and 1930s, but they seemed to disappear from her wardrobe after she became queen in 1937. In 1951, now the Queen Mother, Elizabeth gave the entire parure to Princess Margaret as a 21st birthday present. Here's where the mystery deepens. When Margaret died in 2002, many of her jewels went to Christie's to pay death duties, but the Persian turquoise parure? It wasn't included in the sale. So, where is it now? Some experts believe it returned to the royal collection. Others suggest it remained with Margaret's children. The speculation intensified when Catherine, then the Duchess of Cambridge, surprised everyone by wearing Margaret's lotus flower tiara in 2013, proving some pieces had returned to royal hands. Finally, we come to perhaps the most enigmatic piece, the double meander tiara. This magnificent creation features 2 rows of diamond Greek key patterns, topped by a diamond aigrette. The tiara's origins are murky. Most experts believe it came to the Queen Mother as part of Dame Margaret Greville's 1942 bequest. The Queen Mother loaned it to a jewelry exhibition at Goldsmiths Hall in 1961, which remains its most documented public appearance. For decades, this tiara seemed to vanish completely. Then, in 2005, Princess Anne appeared at a Chinese state banquet wearing what looked remarkably like a double meander tiara. Was this the same piece? The photographs aren't clear enough to be certain, and the palace has never confirmed the identification. The double meander design is quite rare, not the sort of pattern you'd expect to see replicated multiple times, yet without clear documentation, we're left with tantalizing possibilities rather than definitive answers. These gray zones remind us that even the most meticulously documented royal collection has its mysteries. Sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones where we must admit, we simply don't know the ending yet. Our final invisible tiara represents a particularly fascinating category, pieces so historically significant that their absence from Elizabeth II's public appearances seems almost inexplicable. The Queen Adelaide's fringe, one of the oldest items in the royal collection, exemplifies how even crown jewels with impeccable provenance can remain unseen on a monarch. This piece is easily confused with Queen Mary's fringe tiara, which Elizabeth II famously wore for her 1947 wedding and which became one of her recognizable pieces. However, Adelaide's fringe tells a different story, one of a transformative jewel that served multiple generations but somehow never found its way onto the late Queen's head. In 1831, King William IV commissioned Rundell and Bridge to create a revolutionary piece for Queen Adelaide. A necklace using diamonds from George III and Queen Charlotte's dismantled jewelry that could transform into a tiara. Victoria inherited the piece in 1837 and made it a signature jewel of her early reign. It was immortalized in Winterhalter's famous painting, The 1st of May, 1851, and crucially survived the 1858 Hanoverian claim, officially becoming a crown heirloom, one of the oldest pieces in the royal collection. The fringe lived multiple lives through the 20th century. Queen Alexandra uniquely wore it as a waist girdle for Edward VII's 1902 coronation, while Queen Mary temporarily restored its tiara form before commissioning her own, more regular fringe in 1919. By 1936, it had reverted to necklace form when Gerard added a concealed clasp. The Queen Mother wore it throughout the 1950s for portraits and state banquets, even once pairing it with Mary's fringe tiara, a rare double fringe moment. When Elizabeth II finally inherited this ancient treasure in 2002, she already possessed Mary's fringe tiara and her own City of London fringe necklace. Despite its extraordinary provenance as one of the collection's most historically significant pieces, Adelaide's heirloom remained unused, a striking example of how even the most important items can become invisible when a monarch has similar, perhaps more personally meaningful alternatives. Our journey of Elizabeth II's invisible tiaras draws to a close. This is certainly not a complete list. We don't know exactly how many tiaras resided in the royal vaults or what other pieces might have belonged to the late queen. In my view, Elizabeth didn't wear many of these tiaras for various reasons. Some didn't quite suit her royal status. Pieces like Queen Mary's delicate diamond bandeau, the modest Cartier halo, or the sapphire sunray bandeau were more appropriate for princesses than a reigning queen. Others were perhaps too closely associated with loved ones, such as the Greville tiara, which became the Queen Mother's signature piece, or Margaret's turquoise tiara. But we can't know for certain what guided Elizabeth's choices. What I find delightful is how some of these sleeping jewels would suddenly spring to life and create genuine sensations. The lotus flower on Catherine, the halo at her wedding, the diamond bandeau on Meghan, the Greville emerald kokosnik on Princess Eugenie. Each such appearance became an event, reminding us of the richness of the royal collection. Which jewels would you most like to see return? On whom do you dream of seeing them? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through the world of royal jewels, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Many more stories about royal treasures await us.